So we'll go through successful supervision. The CEU sign-in code is 2804. And we'll be discussing pivotal skills to start. And so pivotal skills, as I mentioned, are skills that are foundational. They create broad impact on multiple repertoires. Two examples are attending and imitation. Once a client is able to attend and imitate, we can start working on multiple repertoires, so skills in all different areas where the attending and imitation, of course, are foundational, fundamental. There are different pivotal skills at different points in the lifespan, which include reading and driving, right? So if we're able to drive a car, we are able to get to many other places, and this allows different opportunities for us as well as access to other skills. That's a foundational skill for many people. Reading as well. Once a student learns how to read, obviously that opens up many opportunities for them. Pivotal professional skills include problem solving, organization and time management, and also stress management. And then some interpersonal skills are multidisciplinary teaming, therapeutic relationships, peer interactions, and supervisory interactions. These skills influence many other repertoires in both work and personal life. So academic success, clinical effectiveness, productivity, and then in the personal life, household management, potentially money management. And these are pivotal to success as a practicing professional and supervisor. Those who struggle with core professional skills or who become disconnected from their professional reinforcers and support community may be at risk of abandoning behavior analysis as a career. And we really don't want this, right? We don't want our providers or any providers to get to the point where they're burnt out and now they're kind of done with the field. We want to help all of you to be successful in your roles in whatever that looks like and help you to develop those pivotal professional skills. And as supervisors, it's your responsibility to help those working under you to develop these skills. So I have meetings with our clinical directors, regional directors, and regional vice presidents, as well as the corporate clinical team and other members of the corporate team here to provide mentorship, support, and guidance, and so that we can really work together for those pivotal professional skills and managing relationships and making sure that the provider's needs under them are met. And so as a BCBA, that would also fall on the analysts to develop and help develop those skills on their RBTs, for example. So who needs these skills? So everyone, essentially. So supervisees, peers, supervisors, everyone across the organization. So a discussion question here for the first one is to tell me 3 different behavioral indicators that issues may be present in the supervisory relationship. And I have the discussion questions that were actually presented in the journal article, which is pretty cool that they did that. And so if you could tell me, or everyone could put one in maybe, what an indicator could be that there might be something wrong in the supervisory relationship. How might we know that this supervisory relationship is less than ideal? So lack of communication, for sure. Anyone else? Lack of trust, yeah. And so what would a behavioral indicator be? So what would we be able to observe as like an observable behavior, Christina and Michelle, that might tell us or give us an indication that there is a lack of communication or trust impacting the supervisory relationship? How would we know that these are going on? What would we be able to observe? No emails or text messages? Yeah. Absolutely. So I can very easily take a look and see, all right, well, there's no communication going back and forth here other than maybe in person, right? Which is good. It's great to be able to communicate in person. However, we also want some communication between sessions, right? Make sure that something else exists. Providing negative feedback all the time to supervisees. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. We want to focus on the good things too. We want to be able to deliver praise and descriptive verbal feedback that's positive rather than always negative or critiquing. There's room for that, certainly, not the negativity and critiquing, but feedback that will help an RBT or a supervisee to improve in a certain area. Can always be framed positively. So BCBAs who don't model programs and provide adequate materials. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, guys. So we want to expect problems rather than fearing or hoping, right? So we can always expect that something is going to go wrong. There are going to be mistakes, which are learning opportunities. There are going to be opportunities to manipulate variables in the supervisory relationship. There's always room for improvement, always room for growth and learning. And so it might look like problem behavior or accidents at work, an upset family member, therapist didn't arrive for a session on time, poor progress in programs, and maybe a sudden resignation. So things come up, but the most important part is how are we responding to these problems that occur? And Skinner defines problem solving as any behavior which through the manipulation of variables makes the appearance of a solution more probable. So we're solving that problem, we're manipulating variables, and we're making that solution more probable, right? So behavior analytically, even defining problem solving. A structured problem-solving sequence, and this was presented by Linda LeBlanc, is to detect the problem, define the problem, generate possible solutions, select a solution after a pro-con analysis, and to implement solutions and evaluate. For step 1, detecting the problems. So nuanced noticing refers to detecting subtle, small changes in behavior that precede a problem or indicate that a problem exists. So bring me smoke that we can prevent or address the fire together. And so many of you have heard me say in these trainings and in communication with providers that the door is open. I want to know if there is a problem, if there's a question, if there's a concern, and all of your supervisors and the corporate clinical team do too, because I can't fix something unless I know it exists, right? Same with anyone who's in any type of supervisory relationship or even direct therapists, RBTs out in the field. If you're working with a client, you're working there with their significant others, you too should be aware of any problems that might come up. That way you can address them, right? That way you have that opportunity too. You want to provide a specific description and indicate how you knew it was a problem, right? So you always want to be clear in your communication. And some helpful questions to ask are there behaviors that missing that I would expect to see under similar circumstances? Have there been subtle or obvious changes in typical behavior or performance? And are there aspects of the environment that might be unpleasant or undesirable? So step 2, defining the problem. So the crisis is a result of the problem rather than the problem itself. The task of the supervisor is to help their supervisee begin to see a broad range of potential problems in terms of the functional determinants of the problem. You want to ask yourself questions and make observations that help you get at the cause or functions of the problem. And so helpful questions include, what exactly does the problem look like? For whom is this a problem? Under what conditions does the problem occur? What is the typical result of the problem occurring? And you can create a summary statement that defines the core cause or causes of the problem. And so we want to get at the cause or the function of the problem. We want to figure out why it's happening. That way we don't get to the point that we are in a crisis situation, right? When a problem is small, it's a lot easier to address. Then we want to generate potential solutions. So while it can be advantageous to rely on a previously effective problem-solving strategy, it's important to pause and reflect on whether other solutions might work just as well or better based on the function of the current problem that had been identified. And so we want to approach everything we do analytically, determining why something is occurring, and then figure out what are some potential solutions. And you can seek out feedback from other individuals too. Step 4 is to evaluate the options. So while write your most promising solution in the left column, and I'll show you an example of the table. And this was presented at 2. So you write your most promising solution in the left column, and then evaluate your pros and cons of each option. Mark each as a short-term and or long-term pro and con. If one of your solutions is clearly linked to the function from step 2, that is a pro. And so helpful questions include, what are the positive benefits to critical individuals? What are the risk or possible negative outcomes associated with the solution? How effortful, costly, or time-intensive is immediate implementation of the solution? How likely is the option to produce sustained positive effects? How likely is the option to produce sustained negative effects should be? How likely is the option to work quickly? What are the barriers to success? Will there be resistance to implementing the solution? Does the solution completely address the function of the problem to protect consumers, staff, and match the resources? And what would happen if I did nothing? And so here's an example. So you would evaluate the pros and cons, both short-term and long-term, for potential solutions. Step 5 is to evaluate the effects of your solution. Helpful questions here include, who will implement the solution, how and for how long? Who will evaluate the solution and when? How will I evaluate the outcomes of the solution? What will you measure? How much change must occur to feel like you have solved the problem? Was the solution effective? Are the positive effects of the solution sustaining, right? We don't want to put a solution, an intervention in place if we're not already working towards maintenance. Same with our clients, always working on maintenance and generalization and having that at the forefront when starting any type of program. We want to make sure that we can kind of work ourselves out of a job. And then, do I need to try another solution? So being flexible in our supervisory relationships as well as with our clients, that if something isn't working, that's okay. We just make a change. And so mistakes should always be looked at as learning opportunities and not a failure. Mistakes are often how we learn. And it's really helpful to not be afraid of making mistakes and being open to accepting feedback, both positive, of course, and constructive. Next, we'll go through organizational and time management. And before we get to this section, I just want to make sure that there aren't any questions or comments, anything that anyone wanted to share on the previous slides.
I really think that a lot from what was told in the journal articles is absolutely true in regards to like how, well, first of all, even just to have a good relationship in the supervision process, like even in general, just when working in the company too, that you always want to have an ongoing like positive supervision happening. And also like when it comes, it's important to problem solve, that involves with communication. And that's like number one pretty much, is just to communicate what's happening and to collaborate, because problems can't be solved without, coming up with the solutions. And sometimes you got to refer to other people as resource to help with coming up with a solution for like the clients that we're serving.
Absolutely. And I love your points, because part of having really a crucial part of having a strong supervision relationship is having an open and trusting relationship between the supervisor and the supervisee, and always working towards having strong communication. And so, of course, when you first meet your supervisor as an RBT, you're not going to have super strong communication, right? You're not going to be extremely comfortable in bringing questions or concerns to their attention. Likely, maybe you have that confidence, and if so, that's great. But that trust and communication develops and improves over time, as it does in any relationship. And so as long as you're always working on improving, we all have room for growth in our own communication skills, as well as being open to receiving that feedback, because it's not easy. Right? As much as we all want to learn and grow, it's not easy to hear that we didn't do things optimally, right? But it's so important for our growth as providers, as individuals, and for our clients to have those strong, communicative responses with our supervisors or supervisees, and having a really strong communication relationship with them.
Absolutely.
And so to move into organizational and time management, so the discussion question that I have here is, what are some common barriers to effective organizational and time management skills? So what do you guys think might be a barrier to having an effective organizational or time management skills or skill repertoire?
I actually could tell from the experience that I went through that beginning. So like for me, besides working with full spectrum, working as a behavior specialist for the school district, that I know for me, prioritizing like who I have to see first in terms of clients can be like, I know at first, like, it was definitely overwhelming, and I had to, like, figure out and prioritize, like, when in the moment, and learning to be flexible at the same time in regards of who to see and, like, work with, because, it took a little bit, and also, like, this is where it was important for me to communicate with my supervisor about, like, some tips and everything, because I know that like the caseloads can get a lot. And so really just narrowing down of like who's really more important at this time, and also to communicate with everybody that like if you can't make it on this day, then it's okay. That's where the open communication is so important, because that's how you know that like you're there for people, even though you're not like 100% there. And so I think that, I think that a lot of it is that it does take a lot of practice, and also like making sure that you're practicing on the skills. Cause I know for me, like my time management skills was awful in the beginning. So I just wanted to share from my own experience and everything. So it's definitely been getting better over time, and like really learning about who I need to like focus on first and everything. So I just thought to share that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Colin, I see you have your hand up too.
Yeah, so I'll jump in on it's funny, kind of some of the same things Michelle was saying. I was going to say, response effort to, engage in the antecedent behaviors that make everything simpler, and in what Michelle was saying, you really have to build fluency for these time management behaviors to become easier. It's like any other skill. If you think about behavior analytically, as we become more fluent in the behaviors, they become a lower response effort. So a lot of times it's really hard to do this stuff at first, but you kind of have to build your way into it.
Absolutely. And I had an old supervisor who had told me, we need to look at tasks as what's urgent and what's important. And if anything that is urgent and important, that's something that we would need to address first, and seeing what can we ask for help with, what can we delegate, making sure that we're really trying to prioritize what the most important and really necessary tasks are to get to in that moment. And that's something that I've worked with the clinical team on too, because we really want to respond to everyone the second that they ask for help. And unfortunately, it's not always available for us to do that. And so as long as we're responding to everyone within a business day, which is always our goal, and that's part of our communication policy here at Full Spectrum, is that providers also respond to requests within one business day, really to make sure that if there is something urgent, we're catching it. Often it relates to client authorizations. But seeing where can we ask for help. What do we need to prioritize? And that helps us with time management skills too, to really have a bigger understanding of what is it that we need to do and what should we do first. And right. So Christine, I really appreciate your participation too. And so she had said being overwhelmed or having too much on your plate. Absolutely. And everyone needs help, right? And so we all have to be able to find people who we trust and who we can rely on to say, hey, I can't get to this right now. And so is this something that you could please help me with? And hopefully you do have trusted individuals who can assist. And so Sam said taking a lot of personal and workload, causing disorganization. Absolutely. And so part of that too is, and I think Michelle has learned this a little bit too, she's learned this a ton, but being able to advocate for yourself as well as for your clients. I know, Michelle, you can certainly share your own story, but one of the first things that you shared you learned in ABA was being able to say no.
Yeah, that was even just for me learning to talk, that was one of my first words that I learned to communicate at the age of 6. And it was the word no. It was a lot of it had to do with a lot of it was just from my early intervention services, and which include with ABA therapy, and it just happened to be that the word was no. So,
which is great though, because often as adults we're not comfortable saying no either. And of course, you can't always say no to your boss, right, or your supervisor. And there are times when it's appropriate and when it's not. But overall, I think individuals could use some help in knowing when to ask for help, who to ask for help from, and then being comfortable with turning things down at times when it's absolutely necessary.
Right, which is important, for self-advocacy reasons, it's important too, but it's also important knowing, the boundaries of it.
Oh, for sure. And so we'll go through now some information on disorganization and poor time management. And so some potential indicators of this include difficulty retrieving needed materials, frequently running late to meetings and appointments, and frequently missing deadlines, asking for extensions or removal of tasks. And then so some assessment and intervention ideas and resources include to assess if there's a global issue or if there's an issue related to a specific skill. And so this may require specific skill or confidence building in the primary area of concern. We can assess potential barriers with different assessments. One that we've trained on before a little while back related to OBM is the PDCHS. We can assign supervisee relevant readings. We can print, review, and post productivity infographics, and the authors had some resources too that they suggested. I pulled some of the infographics that we'll get to. And then reviewing and teaching the use of common organizational and calendaring tools. So for me, I pretty much have to put most things in Outlook. If it's not in Outlook, I might not get to it. And that's how I structure my day for all appointments, just so that it helps me to stay on top of things. And so some examples here, they have Google Calendar, iCalendar, and Outlook, which I use, and we all have the Microsoft suite as full spectrum contractors or employees. And then tips, so creating recurring events, color coding calendar events, setting reminders, using some tools, location linked reminders such as iPhone, creating relevant folders for email, flagging by level of importance. So I did that too. I'll flag emails that I know are important for me to get to, and they really require some attention that I might not have in that moment. And so I flag them to make sure that I go back to it. And then some people prefer a paper and pencil, a printed out calendar. I used to be that way. And so there are different formats of organizational tools that work better for some individuals over others. And it takes some practice and trying things out in order to learn, what might work best for you. Effective organizational and time management skills, so OTM skills, may facilitate professional success if core content knowledge and skills exist. So for example, if you have the basic clinical skills to be a provider in the field of behavior analysis, but you're really struggling in the organizational and time management skills, by developing those, you'll be more likely to have professional success, of course. Everyone can improve their organization and time management. Getting more done in less time equals less stress and more progress. New demands in personal and professional life require development of new strategies and systems, and failure to do so likely results in feeling stressed or overwhelmed. And then, of course, we always want to be mindful that we're not approaching burnout ourselves. OTM skills have been found to be the single best predictor of success or failure in caseload management skills for BCBAs, and more predictive of success or failure than the size of the caseload, the match between clients' needs and clinical skills, and geographic or funding constraints. And behavior analysts with strong OTM skills can often manage larger cases, have opportunities to develop systems, and can be more likely to be promoted. Getting organized cannot be a one-time event. Mastering time and time management includes assigning tasks to the time of day that allows maximal productivity. So some people are really productive in the morning, and others are really productive later in the evening. And so learning that about yourself is beneficial. And then plan and protect time to plan. The supervisor can readily detect issues related to organizational and time management skills by tracking the supervisee's performance related to meeting deadlines, attending meetings, and carrying out tasks that require planning and organization. If the problems are global, the supervisor might provide resources that are for general effective organization and time management strategies, as well as implement some targeted interventions. The supervisor may elect to prioritize the tasks for the supervisee and describe the strategy that he or she used to establish the priorities. And here are some resources that the article provided for additional information on mastering time and task management. So getting things done, the art of stress-free productivity. This next one is a really common one in the field. And that if you're pursuing higher certification, if you're an RBT, you will definitely have exposure to, I would think, and BCBA certainly, I would imagine you have. And so this is the Bailey and Birch book, 25 Essential Skills and Strategies for the Professional Behavior Analyst. And then the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, 5 Steps for Setting and Accomplishing Productive Goals, Delivering Effective Performance Feedback, and all the productivity tips you need in 9 infographics. And then here, I have some of the infographics just to go through quickly. So we're looking at the night before, so the night before a big day potentially, or even just the night before any day. So plan ahead, rethink your wake up time, and don't be wired. So typically it's suggested that you turn off electronic devices before you go to sleep because of the way that the blue light and the screens can impact you. So that's there. And then having a calming ritual is always a good idea prior to bed. Then after wake up, so don't stress out. Stress puts your brain in crisis mode, making rational thinking difficult and sending you into a negative spiral. Don't press snooze. Do set a routine. Do get moving, so having some type of exercise. Do use your first 15 minutes carefully. Complete some of your more important to-do list items early in the day, that way you know they're done. Don't email, so stay offline as long as you can. I don't necessarily agree with this point, but no one emails about real emergencies anyway. Typically, if there's a real emergency across the company, someone's going to pick up the phone and give me a call. So maybe they'll email about it first, but if it's super urgent, it's not going to be sitting in an email. and do work on a passion project. So have some creativity that you're able to engage in. Get focused. Don't skip your workouts. Don't watch TV. Don't ignore family, and do put on the radio. So these are not behavior analytic, but they were listed as a resource within the article. So I figured I would share with you just as some fun visuals. And then here they have the productivity diet. So what we eat has a direct impact on our performance at work. So making sure that we have good nutrition, we're nourishing our bodies and our brains. And then here, employees who eat all day long, eat healthy all day long, are more likely to have higher job performance. So making sure that we're engaging in self-care with our morning routines, our bedtime behaviors, and nutrition. Here, if you're serious about performing your best at work, make intelligent decisions about the food you have. We don't want to have low energy and low productivity, and how to slow down productivity. Sugary foods like soda and candy, and heavy calorie-ridden foods like hamburgers or fries. So now we'll go through some information on managing personal stress. So upsetting thoughts, for managing our personal thoughts, especially when we're working with clients. So that student or parent is a monster. They're terrible. They'll never change. Not necessarily the best thought for us to have. A calming thought, a way to reframe would be the student is testing where the limits are. Our job is to stay calm and help them learn better ways to behave. This parent is advocating for their child. We can work together to put the student's needs first. I can handle this. I am in control, and I can help them learn appropriate behaviors. And so sometimes we can get stuck in negative thought cycles. And it's in our best interest, certainly, if we can reframe those thoughts. Self-care. So self-care is taking care of yourself so that you can be healthy, you can be well, you can do your job, you can help and care for others, and you can do all the things you need to do. And so some examples that I have here in the visual are asking for help, which we discussed, spending time alone, potentially, putting yourself first, asking for what you need, setting boundaries, saying no, and forgiving yourself. Giving yourself some grace is always beneficial. Definitely we want to learn from our mistakes, but we also want to be kind to ourselves and to others. Next, we'll go through poor interpersonal skills. And so I have a discussion question here. So what are some reasons why defective interpersonal skills might develop? Does anyone have any ideas? Anxiety? Yeah. Absolutely. So if there's something going on neurologically, miscommunication. Colin, I see that you have your hand up if you want to share, or you did anyhow.
No, I was going to say even time management. You know what I mean? People are rushing. They don't got time to talk.
Yeah, for sure. Different the competing contingencies. Absolutely. So some potential indicators include too much or not enough eye contact, facial expressions and vocal inflection, dominating conversations or not engaging enough, poor body language or posture, frequent arguing, disrespectful language, and rigidity. Assessment and intervention ideas and resources are questionnaires and observation skills, assessing function of behavior and relevant skill deficits, reviewing recommendations for effective interpersonal skills, selecting and teaching interpersonal skills, assigning the supervisee relevant readings, and assigning the supervisee to complete online modules on interpersonal skills. And then here, so our last journal club, we went over behavioral artists and what behavioral artistry looks like and the importance of interpersonal skills. And so since we're talking about interpersonal skills here, I figure I'll just give a little refresher on the behavioral artists. And so behavioral artists are really natural behavior analysts or natural behavioral providers. Therapeutic relationship skills involved are that they like people, they have perceptive sensitivity, they don't like to fail, have a sense of humor, they look for the pony, they're thick-skinned, and they're self-actualized. And so looking for the pony is really that the person is optimistic. They see behavior change in a glass half full context, and they always believe programming will be successful, so they're less likely to burn out. And so not all programming is necessarily going to be successful. However, someone who is a behavioral artist, they have more flexibility and creativity. And so if they are noticing that a specific program or intervention is not as effective as they want it to be, they'll make modifications so that their program in the end is effective and we're benefiting the client. Behavioral artists smile and laugh more. They pay attention and listen more carefully. They are at the same time more objective and more creative, as I mentioned, in the delivery of ABA therapy because they're self-aware and driven to produce positive outcomes for their students and clients, and they're perpetually optimistic. Michelle, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I actually, I think about this with myself a bit because I had my own experiences, like receiving ABA therapy very young and everything. And, this is something that I've been really working on with teachers, like in the schools. I actually do have so far one success story so far this year with one kiddo and this is where it's so important to be patient and open-minded, because when we do consistently have the interventions in place, and yes, there can be a chance that things can happen, but it's important that when there is consistency and everything's being put in place, it can help. So that's something, I just wanted to share from my own experiences of what's been happening, because I know that especially what's been going on today, that there's so much that's changed, especially from what I had years ago to what's happened now. And that, it depends on, it's case by case, of course, but it's important for everybody to be patient and flexible because, things can happen, but at the same time, it can be successful if the work's put in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So remaining flexible and creative in your interventions and being optimistic, not giving up. We can help all clients to make effective change, right? We can manipulate the environment and put appropriate reinforcement contingencies in place. And we will work with clients who do engage in more severe maladaptive behaviors where they might be a risk to themselves and to others. And sometimes progress might not be as fast as we want it to be, but there are many resources that are available both within full spectrum and outside of the company in terms of different trainings and whatnot. And so we definitely, don't ever want to give up hope. So I appreciate your share, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
And so some related terms to the behavioral artist are a therapeutic alliance. So the collaborative caring partnership that characterizes a positive client-therapist relationship, teaching empathy. So putting ourselves in others' shoes and at least briefly seeing their story through their eyes, rapport building, developing mutual trust and pairing with the individual, and compassionate care. So identifying and tacting when others are suffering through the process of perspective taking, tacting your own personal experiences and how the observed suffering may relate to your own, and then acting intentionally to alleviate the suffering of the other individual. Next, the article discussed difficulty accepting and applying feedback. And so here I have another discussion question. So what are some recommendations for addressing issues related to difficulty accepting feedback? What do you think could be beneficial if someone is having difficulty accepting feedback? How could that be addressed?
So I know for me growing up, that was always one of the things that it took me a long time to learn this was about with accepting feedback. But I was reminded that the feedback, it's not really for me personally, but I learned that it's only gonna help me. So it's not, and it's important to teach people that it's not 100% negative. It's just that it's only it's only just like tips that's going to help you grow. So that's how I've learned to with accepting feedback, which it wasn't easy. It took a lot of practice, but over time, like it's just, that's pretty much what I've learned when it came to accepting difficult feedback.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
I think so. I mean, myself also. I can have difficulty accepting feedback. I'll accept it, right? But it might hurt me internally. It might like kill me a little inside, make me a little sad, or like more anxious, like, oh my gosh, I did something wrong, which isn't the case. I actually have been told from providers and directors who work under me different ways that they might prefer to receive feedback, which is really beneficial, right? And so someone might not prefer to receive feedback in a group environment. They might not prefer to receive feedback vocally at all. They might prefer, I've had people tell me that they prefer feedback in writing because then they have the opportunity to reflect on it. And so then you try to deliver feedback in writing and really just meet the needs of your learner. I have had people who have told me that they prefer feedback, as I had mentioned, individually too. And so that's not uncommon, rather than being delivered feedback in front of other people, whether it's positive or negative. Some people don't prefer positive praise in front of others because it makes them feel uncomfortable. And so we're all individual, just like all of our clients are. And so in communication with one another, our supervisees and our supervisors, because feedback should always be bidirectional. You should be comfortable delivering feedback to your supervisor as well if you're noticing something that maybe they didn't catch. Just making sure that we have really strong communication and we're advocating for our needs too and our preferences. And so Dewey said, I also ask for feedback as well, so the person can see that everyone can receive feedback, not just the supervisee. And so it's a two-way street and it's not only on them. Absolutely. And so if you demonstrate as a supervisor or as a mentor that you are comfortable receiving feedback as well, it might help to make the supervisee more comfortable receiving that feedback from you. And Sam said, I agree, understanding that you're able to grow. You're not able to grow if you're not given feedback right. It's okay if you don't do all things well. There's always room for growth, and there's so much to know, especially from people who know more than you do in certain areas. And feedback makes you better at your job. Absolutely. And so potential indicators of having difficulty accepting and applying feedback could be arguing, defensive statements, giving consistent excuses, demanding specific examples of a problem, and crying or not responding at all. And then some assessment and intervention ideas and resources are to assess function, so maybe avoidance or attention, review strategies for effective feedback, and there are some feedback articles here, a resource that the authors had provided. DeGeneiro, Reed, Aubrey Daniels are both great. Assigning the supervisee to read Bailey and Birch, chapter 20. That's a book that I had mentioned a lot of analysts have read throughout their training, and any RBTs who are pursuing higher certification should likely have access to it. We'll probably have it in a course, and otherwise you certainly seek it out. And clearly outline expectations for receiving feedback. There's a tool here, so use the corrective feedback instrument revised, engaging in the specific activities for discussions about feedback. And then last, we're just going to end with a discussion question that you guys might want to share about. So just some steps that you can take to repair a defective relationship due to problematic supervisor behavior. And so for all of you, I know we have a combination of analysts and RBTs in here. And so what are some suggestions that you have to repairing a defective supervisory relationship? What might you do to improve that situation? So a couple that I have would be advocating. Right? So advocating for your own needs, potentially reaching out to individuals who can help. and practicing feedback. That's something that the authors had discussed too. Michelle?
I was going to add on also about with like making sure that things are clarified between the supervisee and the supervisor, like just to clear things up, because, that usually, like when everybody shares from their side, it just helps to bring people together at the same time. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. And part of that involves being vulnerable and being comfortable with that vulnerability. So like if you're going to share your perspective and you're going to advocate for your needs and kind of what you think is going on in the situation, that requires some strength, being comfortable with it.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that I had to do that this year already. It was like literally the first month that I started with my own assigned schools and everything. And I had to schedule a meeting with my supervisor because it was just, I had to advocate for myself because it was a lot with like just figuring out like with all the caseloads and like, I was like, whoa, this is so much that's happening. I'm still learning a lot at the same time, and I really like need help. And I even wrote a whole letter that I shared with my supervisor in person, just so that I addressed that like this is the concerns I have, like, and this is the situation that's been going on, and these are my concerns. And that's where ever since then, like I've gotten supports now of like where I can reach out like really like anytime. And also with like even like my team has a chat that we do a live chat on Mondays, so that way we can all problem solve together. And also with having more visuals for me, because my supervisor started learning about like how well I that visuals help. So like references of things, so that I know like, oh, okay, so I know what to do in this situation and everything. So it really it's really important. So that's kind of like what I went through. And that's where like it's an important message of like really like it's really important as a supervisee that if there's something that comes up, that it's important to address it sooner than later, because you can run into a lot more issues. So it's important to have that open communication with your supervisor.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. I'll take a look at the chat to see if there are any other comments. So yes, so Dewey had said, you already mentioned it, but asking them what their preferred method of feedback they prefer is for sure. And don't always give negative feedback. Be understanding if there are other external variables that the supervisee may have going on as well. And then Julie said assessing her own communication skills with an eye to improvement. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys all for your participation. Are there any other questions, comments, anything that you thought was beneficial or that you really enjoyed about the article, anything at all that you guys would like to share before we end? All right, well, if there are no other comments, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And if you have anything that does come up throughout this week, next week, whenever, always feel comfortable reaching out. We're always happy to assist.
The sign-out code for this presentation is 5913.